a beautiful day for a debate, is it not? And backstage, Dinesh was saying that he was praying for no rain in a sunny afternoon. So I think you won first round. I'm going to go over the format of the debate, give a quick introduction, we'll get on with the main show. It feels like this is a heavyweight title match. They're two good friends, too, so it makes it really fun. So we're in for a great afternoon in the next 90 minutes. We're going to have an opening statement by Dinesh first, 20 minutes, and then an opening statement by Michael. And then there's going to be a 5-minute rebuttal by both people. And then my favorite portion, they're going to be able to cross-examine each other sitting in those chairs. So they'll have 5 minutes each of that. And then we're going to go for audience questions, about 30 minutes. So get your questions. There'll be no speeches. I'm going to give you the tough love. So if I hear speeches, boom, you're gone. Just questions. Okay, Dinesh D'Souza. He's one of America's most influential conservative thinkers. He has a long list of achievements, but among them, he graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Dartmouth College. He's worked in the Reagan White House. He's currently a fellow at the Hoover Institute at Stanford University. He's an author of several books, including the New York Times bestseller, What's So Great About America. His latest work is What's So Great About Christianity. Dr. Michael Shermer is the publisher of Skeptic magazine. He's a monthly columnist for Scientific American, and he's an adjunct professor for the School of Politics and Economics at Claremont Graduate University, where he earned his PhD. He's also the author of several books, which I think have some of the best titles in the book business, including Why People Believe Weird Things. This one is better. The Science of Good and Evil, Why People Chat, Gossip, Share, Care, and Follow the Golden Rule. His latest book is The Mind of the Market, about evolutionary economics, which I have no idea what that is about. Anyway, Dinesh starts first. So Dinesh, come on up, and you got 20 minutes, your opening statement.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, and I come as a fellow skeptic. And what I mean by this is that in this debate, at no time will I appeal to Scripture or revelation or clouds above, rain or no rain. I will be appealing to the same science and evidence and history and philosophy and sociology that Michael Shermer is. And we're here to discuss two topics. Is religion a force for good or evil? And can you be good without God? A few weeks ago in my debate with Christopher Hitchens, he made the point that pertains directly to this. He said, listen, you can think of any good deed that is done by a Christian or by a religious believer, an act of charity, an act of honesty, an act of decency, a philanthropy. He goes, that same deed could be done by an unbeliever. So you don't need God to be good. God is superfluous. If there's a big famine, for example, in Rwanda, you, Dinesh, the believer, can write a check. I, Christopher Hitchens, could just as easily write the same check. So I want to begin by addressing that issue. Can we be good without God? In one sense, clearly yes. No one claims, I certainly don't, that believers have a monopoly on virtue, that unbelievers are capable only of vice. This is preposterous. I think, however, the argument as made misses a deeper point. And the deeper point is this, that the goodness that Hitchens speaks of, or Shermer speaks of, the virtues that the atheists and the skeptics appeal to. If you were to read the books of the new atheists and say, what are the things that you guys value the most? They would say, well, we value the idea of the individual. We value the idea of dissent. We value science as an autonomous enterprise. We value the equal dignity of women, the abolition of slavery. We value compassion as a social virtue. My point is, all those values came into the world because of Christianity. How do we know this? Well, first of all, we look at other cultures, and we see that these values, if they are there, are suppressed. They are not valued in those societies. And all you have to do is go to ancient Greece and Rome before Christianity to see that those values were either non-existent or in fact condemned. Compassion, for example, is not on Aristotle's list of virtues. Aristotle treats it somewhat more as a vice. So compassion was brought into the world by the idea, if you will, of the suffering Christ. Or consider, for example, the value of human life. It is notorious that the Spartans used to take the sick baby to the hillside and leave it out there in the wintry cold to see if it was still alive in the morning. That's not the interesting point. The interesting point is the great philosophers of ancient Greece who knew about this treated it with complete equanimity. It was to them no big deal. And why? Because the value of human life was simply not a cherished value in ancient Greece and Rome. Christianity introduced this idea of the preciousness and worth of every human life. What about the idea of equality? The atheist philosopher Nietzsche condemns it. He says it's a Christian invention, and that's why he's against it. What's he talking about? Sam Harris, in his book, The End of Faith, blames the Christians. He says the Christians bear a heavy responsibility for slavery. In our last debate, Michael Shermer said the Christians are latecomers to the movement to get rid of slavery. But I want to point out that slavery was, for millennia, a universal institution. Slavery had no defenders. It didn't need them. It had no critics. It was kind of like the family, taken for granted. Christianity began the first anti-slavery movement the world has ever known. Many people think this began in the modern age. Nonsense. Christianity was abolished in most of Europe between the 4th and 5th century and the 10th century. Now you might say it was replaced by serfdom. Yes, but there are important differences between serfdom and slavery. A serf is not human property or a human tool in the way a slave is. So where did the Christians get this anti-slavery idea? They got it from a theological premise. We are created equal in the eyes of God. And this idea, which was for centuries a theological insight, was given a political translation. If we are created equal in the eyes of God, no man has the right to rule another man without his consent. This notion became the basis not only of anti-slavery, the abolition movement, but it also became the basis of democracy. If you think, what is the core principle of representative democracy? It's simply, no man has the right to rule another without consent. So the point I'm trying to make here is that Christianity is the root and core of many of the central institutions and values that even secular people cherish. And what that means is that if you have an historical appreciation, even if you're not a believer, you say, at least I should have some respect. I can appreciate the role of Christianity in forming the values that even I live by. Western civilization has two anchors or pillars, and they are Athens and Jerusalem. Even the Enlightenment, which many people think was some sort of a breaking free of Athens and Jerusalem, was built on the assumptions of Athens and Jerusalem, the assumption of classical reason, the assumption of human equality. When Jefferson sat back and tried to find, and Jefferson was undoubtedly, with Franklin, one of the most skeptical, one of the least devout of all the founders. And yet when he had to identify what is the source of rights, why are all men created equal? Why is there equality in the first place? Why should I care about someone who's a total stranger? Jefferson's answer is that those rights are given to us by our Creator. He could think, skeptic and Enlightenment man that he was, of no other source of rights. But now I want to surprise you, and particularly here at Caltech, by arguing that modern science is not only in its beginning, but even now, shaped by three faith-based assumptions that are the direct product of Christian theology. Three assumptions that can in no way be demonstrated by reason. Assumption number one, the universe is rational. Now, If you think about it, it's a little odd. You and I can be rational. We possess brains. How can a universe be rational? Modern science is based on the idea that it is. Second, the universe is lawful. In fact, the universe can be expressed in the language of mathematics. A couple of decades ago, the Nobel laureate Eugene Wigner wrote an essay on the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics, how odd it is that the universe, in a sense, corroborates or follows rules that can be expressed in the language of equations and theorems and pi and so on. And third, the idea that there's a rationality out there that is mirrored in the rationality of our own minds in here. That is also, if you think about it, strange. Our brains are made up of atoms and molecules and neurons and circuits and synapses. Why should the whirring within our heads correspond with the rationality out there? We're not just talking about the mechanisms of survival. We're talking about the rotation of the planets. We're talking ultimately about things that are in distant galaxies far away. Why should it be that we can apprehend them and understand them? Now, if you're a theist, this all makes sense. If you're a Christian, you say, wait a minute. We believe God is omniscient, which is to say super rational, so he created a rational world. God is a lawgiver. He gave us the 10 Commandments, the moral law. We're not totally surprised he gave us the physical law, the laws of nature. And we believe we are created in God's image. We have a spark or a hint of the divine rationality. It's not entirely surprising that we can comprehend the rationality of the world out there. But if you are an atheist, you cannot make any of these assumptions. You have to take them 100% on faith. Now, I now want to turn my attention a little bit to a slightly different point, and that is, has religion been a force for good or evil in the world today? And I want to answer a common argument made by the new atheists, which goes something like this. Look at 9/11, which one atheist writer described as a faith-based initiative. Look at the conflicts in the world today. The Israelis and the Palestinians are fighting about religion. The Hindus and the Muslims are fighting about religion. Look at Kashmir. Look at Northern Ireland. And look at history. It has been in the past. The Crusades, the Inquisition, the religious wars, the Salem witch trials. Bottom line, the world would be much better off without religion, without God in it. I want to address this argument, if I may, and I'm glad to be applauded because I'm clearly fairly stating the opposing point of view. What I want to say here is that like a lot of specious arguments, there is a molecule of truth here. What is the molecule of truth? That the radical Muslims do what they do in the name of religion. The Bin Ladens of the world in their videos, Allah told us to do this, and so on. That is true. However, there is nothing equivalent, not today, on the Christian side. There's no Christian Al-Qaeda, there's no Christian Hamas or Hezbollah, there's no Christian country that's run along the lines of Khomeini's Iran. Now, I know that there are a couple of groans. These are the Christiane Amanpour fans in the audience. You remember her special on God's warriors, which creates this moral equivalence between the Muslim extremists, the Christian extremists, the Jewish extremists. So here we have 9/11, the Bali bombing, the London bombing, the Madrid bombing, and so on. And then we turn to the Christian side, where we see Christiane Amanpour in the hills of Montana, finding a guy in a trailer sitting on a rocking chair without any teeth. Here's the Christian Bin Laden. He wants to blow up the world. True, he doesn't have a job, but he's trying to work up the savings to get something started. Be very afraid of this guy. Now, I think any honest person, and in fact, Even Sam Harris has said publicly that it is ridiculous to make an analogy between radical Islam today and Christianity. But even if you look around the world, what are the Israelis and the Palestinians fighting about? They're not fighting about religion. One side says Muhammad was a greater prophet. The other side says Moses was a greater prophet. Nonsense. They're fighting over land. The Hindus and Muslims are fighting over Kashmir. Even in Northern Ireland, they're not fighting over the Eucharist or transubstantiation. There's a joke about a guy who comes out of his house in Belfast, and someone jumps behind him and puts a gun to his head and says, Catholic or Protestant? And the guy goes, well, actually, I'm an atheist. And the voice says, Catholic atheist or Protestant atheist? The point here is that religion doesn't have that much to do with it. Now, if you look at history, I consider myself an educated guy. If someone had said to me a few years ago, Dinesh, how many people were killed in the Salem witch trials? I would say, I'm not sure, but, I read Arthur Miller's The Crucible in college, and it's a big spot on American history. I don't know, hundreds, maybe thousands. Well, how many people were killed in the Inquisition? Well, that was kind of a biggie. The Spanish Inquisition, which was the most notorious, probably killed, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, millions. The truth of it is that if you look at history, and there's now a wide and reliable scholarship on all this, I would recommend Henry Kamen's book on the Inquisition. He's considered the greatest living authority on the subject. He points out that the Spanish Inquisition, over a period of 350 years, killed approximately 2,000 people. I'm not exactly a math major, but by my count, that's about 5 guys a year. Now, that's about as many as Pol Pot killed on a good afternoon. My point is, here you have the Inquisition. Well, what about the Salem witch trials? All you have to do is go to Salem. The witches are really thriving. Most of them are now tourist guides. And if you pick up one of their brochures, you'll see right away the number of people killed in the Salem witch trials was in fact precisely 18. Now, that's 18 too many, or 2018 too many, but look, let's keep a little sense of proportion or balance. While the atheists are crying crocodile tears over the crimes of Christianity that occurred 200, 500, or in the case of the Crusades, 1,000 years ago, crimes that, by the way, are unrepeatable today. We're not exactly going to have the Salem witch trials here in Pasadena next week. Meanwhile, the atheists completely ignore and duck and try to get out from under the crimes of atheist regimes, which are not ancient. In fact, they have occurred within living memory in the last century. I'm not just talking about Stalin in Russia or Mao in China or the Nazi regime. True, if you bring those three together, those three regimes in the space of a mere 5 decades killed no fewer than 100 million people. In other words, the regimes of atheism have produced a virtual mountain of bodies and an ocean of blood. We're not even talking about Pol Pot's 2 million, or Ceausescu, Kim Jong-il, Fidel Castro, Enver Hoxha, the list goes on. Now, Richard Dawkins in The God Delusion makes an extremely important qualification. He says, well, yes, it is true, but you have to notice that the Christians killed in the name of Christianity. You may have had tyrants who were atheists, but they really didn't kill in the name of atheism. Now, Dawkins is actually an accomplished biologist, but I think that there are some dangers to letting a biologist leave the lab. And why? Because here is a guy who's straying out of his field, reveals a complete ignorance of history. All you have to do is read the Communist Manifesto. All you have to know is a little bit about these different regimes to see right away that this wasn't a matter of having a dictator who happened to be atheist. The whole idea in Marx is that religion is the opium of the people. The whole idea is to create a new society, a new man, and a new utopia, liberated from the shackles of traditional religion and traditional morality. So here's my bottom line, and that is, if you think the bin Ladens of the world are bad, bin Laden in his wildest imagination could not even begin to match the crimes of atheism that have occurred within our lifetime. It is atheism, not religion, that is responsible for the mass murders of history. Now, we'll see for Michael Shermer some dodging on this issue, so I just want to preempt this as I conclude by reading you a line from Daniel Dennett in his book, Breaking the Spell. He says, "It is true that the religious fanatics are rarely inspired or guided by the deepest and best tenets of those religions." Then he says this, "So what? Al-Qaeda and Hamas, terrorism is still Islam's responsibility, and abortion clinic bombing is still Christianity's responsibility." To which I say, amen. In other words, if crimes are committed in the name of an ideology, the people who share that ideology must accept some responsibility for them. But here's my point. Let's be a little even-handed about that. If that is true of religion, it is also true of atheism. The atheists don't get to dodge and say, well, really, but we wouldn't do that. We're such nice people. The atheists don't get to blame the Christians for Torquemada and then get out of the blame for, say, Stalin. We have to use a single standard in this argument. So I think at the end of the day, we will find that there is good and there is evil. It is, of course, in human nature. We're going to see it everywhere. But if you toll up a little bit of a balance sheet, I think you see that our civilization, including the values that those of you who are secular cherish, wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Christianity. In this sense, I think you can say, even if reluctantly, even Michael Shermer, thank God for Christianity. Thank you very much.